There we go. Okay, I can apologize to everybody all at once now. I am sorry, folks. We are starting late. We're having some computer problems this morning, so we're running behind. But we're ready. We're about ready to almost get going here in a sec. So, welcome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I apologize that we're late and discombobulated this morning. Discombobulated. If you look that up in the dictionary, you're going to see a picture of me this morning. We're going to be in the book of Daniel still this morning. We have carried through about 1 to 2 chapters, half to 1 chapter a week, as soon as I can find it. So Daniel chapter 8. We did Daniel chapter 7 last week. Anybody remember anything from Daniel chapter 7? I do, but I'm going to hold my answer for half a second. Daniel chapter 7. What do we remember from Daniel 7? Is it weird? Is it confusing? Yep, we're getting, okay, good. It's weird, it's confusing. What's weird about it? What's confusing about it? What's disturbing about it? Visions? What's in the visions? Statues? Yep. Daniel talks about these statues made of different materials. Where's... There we go. Okay. I've got some of my notes now. Some statues of some different material. Some dreams. Daniel's a dreamer. And other people have dreams. Other people have visions, not just Daniel. But Nebuchadnezzar has a vision or two. Belshazzar, we have the writing on the wall, right? That's still a saying to this day. You see the handwriting on the wall. That's how you know when your time has come to an end. Just like our computers are not working today, I'm seeing the writing on the wall for the computers. They're going to be rebuked. Will we what? I didn't hear. A dream? Oh, I don't know. I don't think so. I think that God's word is revealed in visions in his chosen prophets, and I think that he has completed his work through the New Testament, and I don't think that we have visions today. We did bring that up a couple weeks ago when we kicked off this series, though. It's a really good comment, though, because there's definitely some confusion about that to this day. So Daniel 7, very prophetic, apocalyptic language. So apocalyptic means that you are revealing. We think of apocalypse, like we think of Armageddon, like we think of the end of the world, but that's not really what those words mean. So an apocalypse is a revelation. You have one in your Bible. It's called revelation. It's not plural, revelations. You can call it that. I'm not going to correct you. But it's an apocalypse, the apocalypse of John, they would call it, Revelation. And so there's a special vocabulary that kind of goes along with apocalyptic language. And we have this vivid imagery that brings these fantastical images to your mind about what is going on here. Oh, there's a beast from the sea, and this beast fights that beast. And we're thinking, what is this, Godzilla versus King Kong? And No, the Bible explains it to you, and we saw that in Daniel 7. We're going to see that in Daniel 8. The Bible explains to you and says the beast represents a king or a kingdom. So we have this language that's very disturbing, and Daniel's disturbed by it, and so it's okay that you're disturbed by it. But it doesn't mean what it says, right? Because Daniel's revelation is interpreted by the angel, and the angel says, this is what it means. So we're going to do the same thing again as we did last week in Daniel chapter 7. We started in the middle, and then we went to the beginning, and we're going to do the same thing in chapter 8. Because in chapter 8, you have a similar pattern, that you have this unfolding of this image of all of this weird, wild things happening, and then you have an explanation. And it's very easy for my imagination to just go to town and to say, wow, oh, this could be this could be that, what could it mean? Hold on. The Bible tells you what it means. The Bible explains itself to you. Yes, Daniel was disturbed after the explanation. Yes, it's bothersome. It's confusing. Daniel didn't share it right away, it says, but it is explained. And so we're going to deal with that explanation first so that when we get into the parts that are more confusing, we have that grounding that we know that this is what it means. So verse 15 of chapter 8, while I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, okay, sympathy, I appreciate that, Daniel. I don't understand all of it either. I'm doing my best. I have the benefit of hindsight. I have the benefit of history. I have the benefit of the revelation that we're about to read, but trying to understand it. Trying to understand it. What's Daniel's message throughout the entire book? God wins. There's kingdoms, there's empires, there's people that work against God, and they lose. So Daniel, he's trying to understand this vision. There before me stood one who looked like a man, and I heard the man's voice from Uli calling, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision. Okay, so we have a vision. We haven't read that part yet. We have a vision, and is it clear, plain, simple? No, Daniel's trying to understand it. Does it mean one-to-one analog of exactly what it says? There's a beast, and there's a goat, and there's a lion, and there's a man, and the eagle turns into a man, and all this. Is that what it means? No. Bible says it's not what it means. So tell this man the meaning of the vision. As he came near the place where I was standing, I was terrified and fell prostrate. Son of man, he said to me, understand the vision concerns the time of the end. There's your first clue. Something is coming to an end. But what? What is coming to an end? That is a river. Yeah, we've got a couple maps this week. And so there is some geography that is in the lesson this week. And you're going to see a little bit of that. Yeah, so that's a place. That's kind of a place reference. And that's important this week more so than some of the others because he does spend more time talking more about which empires that we're discussing. And so, yeah, that's a good question. That's a good speed bump. And that is just kind of a geographical marker. Okay, while he was speaking to me, whoopsie-doo, one more. I don't know, the doodad worked a minute ago, and now it's not wanting to. Can you go forward for me one? We're just having all kinds of computer problems today. Might have to cancel out of it. Just tell it to quit. Say, go away, leave me alone. I'm trying to do something. Okay, get your Bibles out. Verse 18. While he was speaking to me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground. Then he touched me and raised me to my feet, and he said, I'm going to tell you what will happen in the time of wrath. Okay, so first he said it was the time of the end. He doesn't say what is ending, but he says the time of wrath. What might that mean? The time of wrath. God is love, right? God is ever patient. God is ever kind. Well, God is love, but out of his love, he teaches us righteousness. And that teaching of righteousness sometimes involves discipline. And so when folks are not being as they should, God, in his wisdom and his judgment, he gives them his wrath. And that's what God has done to Israel, and that's why they're in Babylon. And what actually happens is those nations that are used by God to judge Israel are then judged. So what they have done is still against God's people, and they will pay for it. So I'm going to tell you what will happen at the time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. The two-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. All right, we skipped to the end. We didn't see this part yet. We don't know anything about this two-horned ram yet, because I wanted to explain it first. There are kingdoms that are named here, the Medes and the Persians. Okay, the shaggy goat, it says. I guess this is kind of like Scooby-Doo and Shaggy, maybe. The shaggy goat is the king of Greece. Okay, these are real countries, real places, real people, real emperors, real empires, and they are at war with each other because that's what empires do. The shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between his eyes is the first king. Okay, we skipped over all the weird, there's a thing and a dude, and it does this, and weird things happen, because what we're talking about is Greece, and there is a king over Greece, an emperor, and when the emperor falls, is there a clear line of succession and just very peaceful transfer of power, they like to say? No, there is not. Okay? The four horns that replace the one king represent four kingdoms that will emerge. So you have a ruler that has united geography of Greece, and when he dies, those regions then war with each other. Four kingdoms that will emerge from this nation, but will not have the same power. So this original Greece that ruled all this land, all this area, and they were so strong and unstoppable until their leader died. And then the four that rise up, they're not as strong. That makes sense. In the latter part of their reign, when the rebels have become completely wicked, a stern-faced king, a master of intrigue, will arise. He will become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation and will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy the mighty men and the holy people. Now, of course, Daniel's disturbed. This is uncomfortable. We're hearing about this judgment. We're hearing about this destruction. This doesn't sound very good. What's happening? But what is happening to Daniel, we can say what has happened. Okay? What happened to Daniel is something that happened a long time ago. So when we are reading what happened 2,000 years ago to get back to Jesus, 500 more years ago to get back to Daniel, we're reading about history. So we just read about the king of the Medes, the kings of the Persians, the kings of Greece. We don't really have those kingdoms like that anymore, right? We have the European Union and all these different presidents and prime ministers, and you don't have these kingdoms and empires the way you literally did back then. And we're going to talk about some of those individuals. So he's saying that there is a kingdom that's going to rise up, and this kingdom that rises up will cause great problems for the people of God. Can you go forward for me again? It was working for a minute, and then I got spoiled by it. So 25. He will cause deceit to prosper, and he will consider himself superior. Doesn't really stand out like a king, right? That's kind of normal for kings. When they feel secure, he will destroy many and take his stand against the prince of princes, yet he will be destroyed, but not by human power. Verse 26. The vision of the evening and the morning has been given to you is true. 26, yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Like I said, we're having all kinds of computer problems this morning, and we're going to get through this. Okay, so the vision is true. That's a good reminder. This is not something that's up to speculation. This is something that we know will happen, or to Daniel's perspective, to our perspective, we can see how it has happened. But he says, seal up the vision, for it concerns the distant future. How far away is the distant future? If you're a kid and it's Christmas season right now and you're waiting on Christmas break to get through all the way till next Wednesday, the distant future is next Wednesday. When is it going to get here? Or when I was little and I thought 40 years old was old, and now that I'm 40, I know that it's not. The distant future. It's not specific though, is it? It's up to Daniel's perspective. Where is he standing? He's standing 500 years before Christ. and he's learning about something that will happen in the distant future. So let's keep that in mind. I, Daniel, was exhausted and lay ill for several days. Then I got up and went out about the king's business. I was appalled by the vision. It was beyond understanding. So Daniel, the servant of the Lord, the prophet of God, he's disturbed. This is troublesome. He doesn't understand it immediately. It's been explained to him, even with the explanation. I still don't understand it. But we have the benefit of history. So we have words of the Bible that tell us about Greece and the Medes and the Persians and the rising and falling of these transfer of power between these kings and kingdoms and civil wars and empires and sub-empires that rise up and battle one another, and we can see that from history. So I'm sorry if this is going to now become more of a history lesson and less of a Sunday school, but that's what you're going to get this week. Okay, so we finished out Daniel chapter 8. By starting in the middle. So now we have to go to the beginning. In the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign. We looked at this. We talked about Daniel's chapter order is not in chronological order. Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 8 is dated to the reign of King Belshazzar. Nebuchadnezzar's already come and gone, but we read about Nebuchadnezzar coming and going in chapters 4, chapter 5. So there's a little bit of back and forth. So now we're in the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign. Daniel says, I had a vision, one after the one that had already appeared to me. So 7 does come before 8, but 7 and 8 are coming before 5 and 6. In my vision, I saw the citadel of Susa. There's a little more geography for you. In the province of Elam, the vision was beside the Ulai Canal. So I said it was a river. I'm sorry. It's a canal. That's like a creek, I guess, in a pond. Okay, so raise your hand. When was the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign? Anybody remember what year was that? I'm kidding. I know that we don't know that. I didn't know that. 552 BC. So I think that's important, though. The Bible tells you here's when this happened, and the Bible doesn't tell you many things that are not important. I'm not going to have that discussion later and say, well, what does it tell you that's not important? Right? Doesn't. So why does it tell you when it took place? Because it matters when it took place. And this took place about the year 550. About 2 years after chapter 7. So look at 7, look at 8. There we go. There's some time markers there. So 552 BC. Okay, I apologize if these are not going to show up very well. I did not come up here and test it with my own eyes. It looks good at home, and that's good enough for me. So here's some of our geography. Elam, I think I remember that word. The Medes and the Persians. We lost the signal again. I'm really sorry. We're having a back and forth. So you see this zoomed in view. There you go. Awesome. You can make that bigger if you want to. I cannot this morning. I can't make it bigger from here. So you'll have to do for the folks at home. What do we see here? We see the lands of Sumer. We see little dots in here for Babylonia, for Assyria. I don't know if these are coming to mind. These are the enemies of God's people. These are the people that are being used to judge God's people. They are carried off from the land of Israel to Babylon. So here's a map that shows where Babylon is. And we see the Euphrates River. And we see the Arabian Peninsula and Turkey. So we're going to zoom out a little. There we go. Oh, that's on the deck, on the little grid buttons down there, the little extra buttons that say slide with, yeah. It's okay. There we go. Okay, there's a little bit more zoomed out view. So you can still see Babylon is about centered on the map view. And so we were zoomed in on that earlier. Now we're looking further zoomed out. What's it say at the top? the Persian Empire. What's the visions about? The Medes and the Persians. So this is about the rulers that rule this entire region. Okay, Cappadocia, that's Turkey, right? I don't know if you know your shapes. Memphis, that's in Tennessee, right? Thank you. Yeah, no, that's in Egypt. You see Judah on there, Damascus, you've probably heard of Jerusalem. So just kind of get your bearings. These are the folks that are going to be involved in this worldwide transfer of power. Okay? So, who's involved in this? Look in your history books. I've got a few citations in here. You can see who helped me kind of put these notes together. A scholar named Miller. Alexander was one of the great military strategists of history. Is he making a joke there? You know Alexander the Great? Alexander was one of the great strategists of history. He was born in 356. When did our vision take place? 5 something or other. If you remember one number, that's fine. It's in there twice, 552. He was born in 356. What's Daniel's vision about? Daniel's vision is about something that happens in the distant future. 200 years later. I'm not good at math. He was born in 356, the son of a great conqueror in his own right, Philip of Macedon. Philip had united Greece with Macedonia and was planning to attack Persia when he was murdered. Alexander, educated under Aristotle, was 20 in 336 when he succeeded his father as king. A year and a half later, he launched his attack against the Persians. In the same year, Alexander won the battle of Granicus in Asia Minor, thereby bringing an end to the dominance of the Medo-Persian Empire. We just looked at that. There you go. The Medes and the Persians, the Persian Empire, what happens? Alexander the Great comes along and he says, thank you, I will be in charge now. With his subsequent victories at Issus, Arbela, I should have learned these before today, I'm sorry. The conquest of the Medo-Persia was complete. Incredibly, with only 3 years. That's important. It was quick. Alexander moved quickly. With only 3 years, Alexander conquered the entire Near East. And then there's your citation about Miller and who that is and where that came from, the New American Commentary. Okay, so Alexander has an empire now. So we're going to zoom out just a little bit more, just a tinge more. And now we've got some more colors on the map. What happened after, what did it talk about? About the kings? The 4 kings. So Alexander is swift and quick and defeats the Persians, and things are going great until Alexander dies, and then the kingdom remains united? No, it doesn't. The kingdom remains divided. And so now we have the 4 kings that rise up. Okay? Another thing that's happening in history throughout all of this, and I apologize if this is too small. Another thing that happens in history is something called Hellenization. Okay, so on that map, if you see all of these different regions, all of these different cultures, all of these different people, what is happening when you have one ruler? What was happening when you had one ruler was he was working to make one culture and one language. One culture and one language. And so Gabriel's telling him there's something about the time of the end. There's something coming that's going to happen at an important time in the history of what God has been planning to do for his people. And God has been preparing for, from the foundations of the world, the coming of Jesus. Right? And so what preparation needs to happen? Well, we can look in history and we can see when Jesus came along. We can look at Daniel and we can see what was happening. And we see this standardization of culture across this region to where you're going to have the same people speaking the same language and understanding the same things. So that's a process that's been called Hellenization. The effects of Alexander's conquest across the whole earth which Daniel 8 verse 5 says, was that God used him to spread the Greek culture to all the lands to be conquered. One of the most important elements was the spread of Koine Greek language. That's the language that your New Testament is written in. You open up your Bible and it's in English, but it's in English because it's been translated. And people say, well, which translation do I use? Which translation is best? Well, that's because you've got to figure out how do you convey the meaning of the idea that is in Koine Greek and bring that into English in a way that's faithful to the meaning of the text. And so Koine Greek is a language then that is a dead language, locked. It dies out, and we know throughout history all of what is in the dirt, of all the papyrus and all the things that we've pulled out, we can establish the meaning of these words. And we can translate this from the Koine Greek into all of these other languages. Because unlike English, which continues to evolve, and you have things like cool and rad and, okay, I'm really dating myself now. Those aren't the new words. The kids could be in here and tell me what the new words are. We're always adding new words. Koine Greek, you're not having that. And so you know what was written 2,000 years ago, it means what it meant then. Okay, so Koine Greek, important part of the Hellenization of the world. Koine Greek continued to be the important language in the time of Jesus. Was in fact the language in which the New Testament was written. We just said that. In short, the sovereign God of the universe made certain that Koine Greek was the leading language in the entire known world, so that all the world could potentially read about his redemptive plan for mankind, which helps us with Paul's phrase in Galatians chapter 4, when the fullness of time came, God's appointed time, his perfect time in history. When the fullness of time came, one more, perfect. God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, under the law, in order that he might redeem those who are under the law, that we might receive the adoption of son, Galatians 4, 4 and 5. The fullness of time, God's appointed time, that's what Daniel is being told. So why now? Why then? I've got now in quotes there because it's not now. Now is now, but it happened then. And so if you're there then you would say, why now? Everybody with me? First of all, the time was right religiously. During the Babylonian captivity, Israel once and for all forsook idolatry. What do you read about in your Old Testament? The cycle of the judges is a cycle of getting into the promised land. Things are going great. We praise God. Things get hard. We turn to other gods. We bring in other people. We bring in idolatry. And then we suffer. And then we get better. It's called the cycle of the judges. You see, and then everyone did what was right in their own minds. See that statement over and over again throughout the book of Judges. Idolatry was prevalent. Kings, Chronicles. Idolatry was prevalent throughout Israel's history. That's why you read about it on every page of Elijah calling down fire from heaven when he's fighting with the prophets of Baal, right? Baal. He's saying, he's not real. God's real. I'll prove it to you. So when they go into Babylonian captivity, and they lose the land, and they lose the temple, these eternal promises that they thought they had that didn't matter what I did. God has made this unconditional promise to me. And God says, I don't think you understand. And he helps them understand. And then they understood. They were carried off into Babylon, and they forever wrote off idolatry. Why now, number 2? Second, the time was right culturally. Christians who propagated the gospel during the first several centuries had a common language to those whom they witnessed and with those whom they worshiped. Alexander the Great had thoroughly established the Greek culture and language throughout the known world, and these continued their dominating influence long after Rome succeeded Greece as the world ruler. What we have here is a failure to communicate. Heard that? They didn't have those challenges as much because they had that same background. They had that same culture, and God was using these folks to help spread that language and culture across the region where Christianity took off like a wildfire. Why now, number 3? The time was right politically. Rome had instituted Pax Romana, or Roman peace, which provided economic and political stability. Okay? We're trying to spread the gospel. We're trying to spread the word. We're trying to bring people this new religion. And early preachers and teachers could travel freely and safely throughout the empire. So that's why did Jesus come when Jesus did. Why do we know that this was just the right time? How do we know that this is what God said this was the right time would be? Okay, Daniel chapter 8. We're going to now read the vision, and we're going to remember some things about the Medes and the Persians and Alexander the Great and his conquering and his death and the four kingdoms rising up. We're going to keep all of that history and politics in our mind, and we're going to read this vision. I looked up, and there before me was a ram with two horns standing beside the canal, and the horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later. I watched the ram as he charged toward the west and the north and the south. No animal could stand against him, and none could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased. Is this about Godzilla? Is this about King Kong? Is this about some monstrous beast that physically comes across the land with these horns and these hooves? No, it's about a king and a kingdom who does conquer, but not as an animal. I was thinking about this, and suddenly a goat with prominent horn between his eyes came out from the west. I haven't seen many goats with the horn. Like, do goats do that? They don't do that. They've got a unicorn. Okay, that's fine. You do you over there. The goat with the prominent horn between his eyes came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. He's fast. That's what it's saying. Remember Alexander conquered in 3 years? He's fast. Crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. He came toward the two-horned ram I had seen standing beside him, the canal, and charged at him with great rage. What have we been calling this empire? One of the maps said the Persian Empire. What do we call it sometimes? The Medo-Persian Empire. So you have a big horn, a little horn, the Medes and the Persians. You have Alexander sweeping across the land. Here he comes. He's so fast, without touching the ground. He comes towards the ram and charged at him in a great rage. I saw him, verse 7, I saw him attack the ram furiously, striking the ram, shattering the horns. The ram was powerless to stand against him. The goat knocked him to the ground and trampled on him, and none could rescue the ram from his power. That's what we read. There was a battle, there was a war, there was this battle, that battle, and Alexander, brilliant strategist, and won every battle that he didn't lose. And he conquered. So the ram was powerless to stand against him. The goat became very great, but at the height of its power, the large horn was broken off. Remember, Alexander didn't live forever. Alexander died. Large horn was broken off, and in its place, 4 prominent horns grew up towards the winds of heaven. So what's he saying? North, south, east, and west. There's these kingdoms we saw on the map a minute ago. You could have Babylon. You could have this center of the universe, as we are all self-centered people when we draw our maps. And we're at the middle of it all. North, south, east, and west, there were 4 different kingdoms. We saw that in the map. Verse 9, one of them came, another horn, started small, grew into power to the south and the east toward the beautiful land. What's that? Israel, the promised land. So there's these kingdoms that are encroaching upon Israel again. It grew until it reached the host of heavens, and it threw some of the starry hosts down to the earth and trampled on them. Okay, what's happening? Godzilla, King Kong? No? Okay, we're reading about this vivid imagery, about these amazing things that are happening. What's happening now? Some of the starry host are thrown down. So is that meteorites? Is that Betelgeuse? That's one of the stars, I don't know many of the star names. Alpha Centauri. Those are the closer ones, I think. I don't know. The stars come down, right? That's not what he says. The goat's not a goat, the ram's not a ram, the horn's not a horn, and so the starry host are the people of God. And so the people of God have suffered on their journey to Babylon, and they will suffer in persecution under these wars that are going to happen in Daniel's perspective and have happened from our perspective. And so the people of God get caught up in the crossfire, and they suffer, and that happens in every war. It grew until it reached the host of heavens, and it threw some of the starry host down to the earth and trampled upon them. Verse 11, it set itself up to be great as the prince of the host. It took away the daily sacrifice. Try to remember that. I hope we don't run out of time. Took away the daily sacrifice from him, but the place of his sanctuary was brought low because of the rebellion. The host of the saints and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. It prospered in everything it did, and truth was thrown into the ground. So there has been a rebellion. There has been a carrying off to Assyria and Babylon. And yet, even when the people are restored, there is still discipline that will come upon them. There is still a rejection of God's will, and there is still the enemies of God are defeating some of the people of God for a time. I heard the Holy One speaking, verse 13. Another Holy One said to him, "How long will it take for the vision to be fulfilled?" Right? We hear that in Revelation 2. How long, O God? How long will it take? The vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, the surrender of the sanctuary, and the host that will be trampled underfoot. He said to me, it will take 2,300 evenings and mornings, and then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated. So there's a prophecy that's being given that the temple of God will fall to the enemy, and it will stay around for a time. It will be like that for a time. There will be a period of time when the enemies of God will have control even over the temple. That's what Daniel's prophesying. So I'm sorry I can't share some of this with you, but we talked about Antiochus last week. We kind of touched on it briefly in chapter 7, and there's more about Antiochus this week. Antiochus the fourth is one of the emperors, and maybe the emperor that is thought about here in Daniel 7 and 8, about what did Antiochus do in history, and what does Daniel say and someone will do in the future, right? We've got hundreds of years that are going back and forth between these two time periods. From Daniel being given the vision in the year 500, and then in 200 BC, still 200 years before Christ, we are seeing these events unfold. As the Persians have fallen, Alexander has fallen, and these kings have risen up in his place. And one of those sacks the temple and makes a mockery of it. Okay? So the east side of Alexander's former kingdom, the Seleucid Empire, which was ruled by Antiochus from 175 to 164. That's not backwards. I know I'm not good at math, but you count down towards Christ. 175 to 164 was his reign. Antiochus was singled out for a detailed description of Daniel 8 because of his treatment of the Jews. He assaulted Jerusalem, murdering over 40,000 in 3 days and selling an equal number into slavery. On September the 6th, 171, he began his evil actions against the temple. Why do we know that? Because it's a big deal. And so we know the date because it was written down because it was so significant. September the 6th, 171, he begins his assault, evil actions toward the temple. All through Israel, altars to Jupiter were set up, and the Jews were forced to sacrifice on them. But not everyone went along with it. The Maccabean revolt. Have you guys heard of this? Here we go. Judas Maccabeus, who fought against Antiochus during the years 167 to 164. So there's a rebellion. There's an assault on the temple. Someone comes along and says, God won't stand for this. I'm going to lead the armies of God. And this is what the Israelites were expecting then. They were ready for the Messiah. They were ready for this military victory against their rulers. And they thought it would come through the Maccabees, and that was not God's plan. So the Maccabean revolt takes place. They fight against Antiochus, but they don't prevail, and they don't drive him off. That is not the kingdom God is building. On December the 15th, 168 BC, somebody say that for me. Desecration of the temple reached the ultimate low when Antiochus sacrificed a pig on the altar of the temple. Is that a big deal? Why is that a big deal? They're unclean. And it's the temple. And you have the Holy of Holies, you have the best of the best, and you have the worst of the worst. So we're going to take the pig blood and we're going to sprinkle it on the entire temple, including the Holy of Holies. That's not okay. So they fight against this abomination of Antiochus. Okay, we're wrapping things up. So Daniel is told about the time of the end, but he's not told the time of the end of what? The time of the end. That's all he says. Then he talks about these kingdoms and these empires that rule the known world, and then they collapse, and then there's a great persecution, and then it will be the end. It's the end, it's the beginning of the end of the reign of death. Because Jesus rose again. Jesus comes and he clears things up for us. And he shows the Maccabees, I appreciate that, I guess. I mean, not really what I would do with that. We're not here to lead a military revolt. I think that your intentions are nice to try to fix things. That's not the way we're going to go about it. And the powers, as Paul says, our enemies are the powers and the principalities, and they're defeated on the cross. And these empires that have been used by God to discipline his people are now defeated as Jesus is on the cross. And so the period during which Antiochus stopped the sacrifices, we read about that, from 161 to 164, which is about 6 years and 4 months, which is about 2,300 days. That's the marker that we were told in Daniel, 2,300 days and nights. The number is close enough, this commenter suggests, to the actual number to suggest 2,300 is a rounded number of the actual number. Daniel's vision, given about 531 BC, dealt with events happening around 175 BC. This temple was defiled. The Jews were defeated. And Jesus was still on his way. So, when we read prophecy, we have to be careful that we understand when it was written, who it was written to, what sort of future is it talking about, and how long ago was their future. Because Daniel's future 200 years later is different than my future 200 years later. So keep that in mind when we're studying prophecy. If we get into a study of Revelation and we start thinking about what does this mean and what does that mean, Daniel can be the template to help us understand how the Bible deals with prophecy. Daniel's vision is explained by the Bible as Daniel is being told what it means very clearly, the Medes and the Persians and the Greeks, named by name. And so we can know who some of these people are. But the ultimate message is not to try to figure out each and every point of prophecy and try to figure out 2,300 days down to the minute. It's about God wins, stay faithful. It's about seeing your friends and your family and you're worried for their faith and you stay faithful. It is about seeing powers rise and fall and empires work against God as they always do, and you stay faithful. Jesus will come. All things will be made new. Every tear will be wiped. Every eye will be dry. Things will be better. In the meantime, stay faithful. That's what Daniel's told. He's not saying to be heartless and distant from it. Daniel's disturbed by it. He's worried about it. They're suffering. He prays about it. But stay faithful. And we see what Daniel was told unfold exactly as it happened in history. And we can confirm his prophecy with history that has already happened of this far-off vision hundreds of years later for Daniel. History for us. Keep that in mind in our Bible studies. And we're going to continue with Daniel 9 next week and say a little prayer for our computers this morning. We're going to see if we can get the PowerPoint back for our song service and our worship. You may have your songbooks out this morning. We'll see. What's our hope, Jerry?
these folks in your prayers. Polly made it back with us this morning, which is great. She had kind of been fighting a respiratory infection. Please keep Helen Ferris, Sue Ferris, and the Fredman family in your prayers, if you would. Sue, she has some good days and some not so good days, and just keep them in your prayers. With Helen, it's Jimmy's mom. Just keep her in your prayers. Pray for comfort and direction for the family. Scott Harris, he's a friend of Sonny Baker's. He still lacks a little bit left on the money needed for the kidney transplant. And I think Sonny has probably an email address or a GoFundMe page that you can go to if you'd wish to contribute to that. And Ann Hastings, keep her in your prayers also. She has some good days and some that's probably not so good. Martha Holland, and I don't see her this morning. She's recovering from the flu. Clara, she's still waiting on her biopsy. That's the granddaughter of Don and Sherry Albert. Will Lemons is a cousin of Sharon Childers. He's going to be having surgery on January the 2nd. Tim Lofgren, which is Bill Zimmerman's friend, he had his knee surgery. The one prior to, he had a little bit of issues recovering from that. He is struggling some with some pain, but he's able to start the physical therapy on Saturday. Carrie Smith, she's with us this morning. She had her surgery and went well. And it says it's home, but give her a hug. She's here. That's good news. She's going to have some radiation treatment coming up in the future. Just keep her in your prayers if you would. LaRue Williamson, she had a heart stent placement on Friday, December the 13th, and she's now recovering at home, and she's going to have her stents placed in her legs in a few weeks. Bat's sister, keep her in your prayers also. They're still trying to figure out what's going on with her. We got, for Wednesday night, we're going to have soups on our Bible study at 6:30. If you don't get a chance to come to those are a lot of fun. We're going to have corn potato chowder is what I don't even know what that is, but I'm sure it's good. Every time we show up, we were going to have biscuits and gravy, but this is probably a little better than that. So if you would show up at 6:30 and we'll have a good Bible study and a meal. The Golden Rule Home, items needed for that, we're going to need it before December the 22nd. And delivery will be on the 23rd. There is a sign-up sheet in the back of some of the items that we're going to need for that. And also the area-wide get-together that Church of Christ do every year is going to be January the 5th at Highland Church of Christ in Tecumseh, and that's going to start at 5 o'clock. I'll turn it over to Jay.
Grab your songbook. You have one there. If you don't, probably raise your hand. Someone will get you one, I'm sure. But 627 be our first song. 627. Okay. 627. I'm in the way, the bright and shining way. I'm in the glory land way. Telling the world that Jesus saves today. Yes, I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way.